get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Green Beret and Russ Gallo. And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Green Beret here with you. So glad you can be with us, whether you're tuned in at www.behindenemylinesradio.us, or if you're checking us out on the airwaves, whether it be AM radio, FM radio, or the internet radio, or if you downloaded us and we're traveling along with you as a podcast. We're certainly glad to be along for the ride with you today because we have so much to talk about. A whole lot of breaking news, a whole lot of shaking going on in politics. Later on in the show, we're going to have Nick Polce on the show. You may not know the name right now, but those of you out there who follow conservative politics will be interested to know that Nick is running for, get this folks, a primary election against Speaker Paul Ryan in the 1st District of the state of Wisconsin. You may want to know about him. We're going to talk about him, what he stands for, what he believes in, who he is, where he comes from, and why he thinks he would be a better alternative than the Speaker of the U.S. Congress, Paul Ryan. But before we get to Nick and a discussion of this trend that he's a part of, which is different conservatives stepping up to primary other Republicans, which we're going to talk about later on in the show, let's talk about the news that is breaking this week. Two big pieces we're going to talk about here at the opening of the show. Let's go with the one that broke closest to us doing the show. The headlines are out there, folks, and there may be some rejoicing in Trump land, in the circles of the president, Donald Trump. The investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller may be turning in his favor. Reports now from multiple sources, including, get this, the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune, are saying that while the president remains under investigation by the Mueller probe, that he is not considered a criminal target. This could be very big news. Listen, folks, this investigation has been going on for over a year and a half now, it feels like. November of 2016 to now, here we are in April of 2018. My goodness, we're close to a year and a half. And apparently, the discussion in both articles highlights negotiations between the Trump camp and special counsel Mueller's people trying to get President Trump to have an interview regarding the subject of the investigation, which of course we all know is Russia's influence in the 2016 presidential elections. The fact that it's almost amazing to think about. The fact that the probe is still going on, and yet there's this determination that a year and a half later, the president has done nothing criminally wrong, and they want to just talk to him about what's going on. And what could have happened within his campaign. And the fact that they're basically admitting that he's under investigation, but there's not enough evidence to bring any charges. Here we are, close to 18 months later. That's got to be great news for the president and for his people. Now, Mueller, of course, as we all know from last month, still wants to interview Trump. And they both want to... I think they both want to root out this Russia corruption. Mueller certainly thinks that that's what his mandate is, and I'm sure the president wants to clear up this cloud around him. But you know what? This could be big news. It also could be the reason why there is so much internal conflict among the president's inner circle and his legal advisors. As we know, John Dowd stepped down, and Jay Sekulow has kind of taken over. There seems to be some tactical strife within the president's inner circle, frustration over the advice to refuse to meet with the special counsel, Trump publicly saying that he wants to meet with him. All of this, of course, is conjecture at this point, from anonymous sources and people who claim to be friends and whatnot. There is no official comment either from the Mueller camp or the Trump inner circle at this point regarding whether or not the president is a criminal target of the investigation. But just the fact that this is getting out there now has got to be really encouraging to people in Trump land. I mean, listen, you want to talk about internal strife. I think the president lives in a world of perpetual internal strife. I mean, we've seen what's happened with, the shuffling of the deck chairs that is the cabinet. The latest being, of course, H.R. McMaster out, John Bolton in, good friend of the show. While we're happy for that, and we want to congratulate our friend, Ambassador Bolton, the shuffling of deck chairs in the president's cabinet, the palace intrigue, if you will, is something he perpetually lives with, works with, and in my opinion, thrives with, because it leaves all the president's men around him on unsure footing. And in my experience in an office setting, when you're on unsure footing, you're more likely than not going to be minding your P's and Q's, because you never know what's going to set off the boss man. You never know what's going to tick him off or what could end up with your head on the chopping block. So, to me, internal strife, especially within the White House itself, maybe not necessarily the cabinet, but certainly within the White House itself, to me, keeps everybody on edge, keeps everybody minding their P's and Q's, like I said, and probably doing their job to the letter in the hopes that they won't catch the jaundiced eye of the president, who lives for the tumult. So, where does this leave us? This leaves us in an interesting situation, folks, because the president now is living in sort of this limbo. While he may be reassured that he's in the clear so far criminally based upon information to date, that doesn't mean that he's in the clear for good. A subject of an investigation under Justice Department guidelines is defined as a person whose conduct falls within the scope of a grand jury's investigation. What does that mean for people who are not lawyers like me? That means that the grand jury can still inquire, and there could still be evidence linking that person to the commission of a crime. And, the target, the subject that we would be talking about, the subject of the investigation, President Trump, could become a target with his or her own testimony, which is why his inner circle was saying, don't testify, don't go voluntarily. You have rights as a witness and as a subject of an investigation. Now, President Trump could very well have nothing to hide. That seems to be his position since day one and hasn't changed. But with investigations like this, folk, and I'll tell you, when it comes to grand juries, you feed a grand jury whatever you want. It's been my experience. You can get the grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, and they'd be okay with it in the morning. They can fill out that indictment sheet and pass it along, and there could be very little to nothing involved in the indictment or any type of real criminal conduct there. So think about a report that Bob Mueller could come up with here. He could write a report and then let Congress decide what to do with it, which kind of makes the 2018 elections all that much more important. So, while the president may be in the clear right now, criminally, the machinations of politics are going to take over from this point, folks. Maybe Mueller can't get him criminally. Maybe he can't get that grand jury indictment that everybody seems to think on the left that he can get. But what it could mean is that politics may come into play, the implication of guilt, rather than the the actual guilt, the appearance of impropriety, rather than the finding of actual impropriety. That will lead maybe to the ruination of President Trump if we end up with a split Congress, which makes 2018 a vital election to the president. Which may be why, folks, President Trump has really been pushing the news this week of the caravan of people without borders, refugees from Honduras that are walking by foot through Central America and now into Mexico and through Mexico, headed for the American border looking for asylum, looking for relief, looking to come into America. And the president is sticking to his commitment to protect the border as best he can, talking about bringing the National Guard to the border, not just for, recon or, construction projects or any sort of work on the border, but for actual enforcement of the border. President today in a meeting with the press, and I know he met with the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, and we're seeing a possible movement of National Guard troops to the border. Now, the left is going nuts about this, by the way. You'll see on all the news shows talk of military forces going to the border to enforce domestic policy. This is against the Constitution. Folks, you're going to see a lot of amateur pundits and constitutional scholars out there trying to tell you about this. It just isn't true. When we talk about the National Guard can definitely be deployed to the border. It's been done in the past. President Obama did it in 2010. President Bush did it in 2006. The only difference between the two right now is the mission that was assigned to the National Guardsmen who were deployed to the border. This may be the first time since, probably 2001 when National Guard would be activated for any type of law enforcement activity on American soil. And, probably during the storms, I would think down in Texas and Louisiana, possibly, may have been another time. I could be wrong on the dates, but you get my point, folks. Going down to the border when there is no natural disaster, but a man-made problem approaching the border, and having the National Guard there, that's where things get interesting. President Trump is saying that while we're in the process of getting our own immigration house in order, while we're looking to build the wall, while we're looking to, build fences, repair fences, beef up our number of agents on the border, Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, Homeland Security agents, all types of enforcement. While we're looking to get all that put back on the border, we're going to keep the National Guard there to make sure that the border is okay. So let's talk about this caravan for a second, because this might be the brilliance of Donald Trump, and again, focus on 2018. President Trump has been doing a lot of good things lately with an eye to 2018. This is the second one in 2 weeks. The first one being his whole response to the attack on the Second Amendment, the March for Our Lives, the Parkland High School kids, David Hogg, and all that. And his response being the Second Amendment must be protected, and really getting the Second Amendment crowd, the NRA members, those who actually come out to vote, giving them a reason to turn out to vote in 2018, in an otherwise lackluster year coming for Republicans. Remember that cyclical nature of politics, folks. Whenever a president is elected from one party in that next midterm, you see a swing back the other way to the other party in an attempt for the American people to balance out their government. It happens all the time. The question becomes, what is the degree of the swing back and forth? Up until now, I've been saying the swing would not affect the majority in either the House or the Senate. The Senate's probably looking better than the House right now, but you never know. I'm still sticking to that proposition because of the mobilization of President Trump at rallies and getting people behind his agenda again. And one of his biggest points that he's banking on again in 2018, he's rolling the dice again and, trying to hit 7 one more time like he did in 2016, is immigration policy.